Welcome to Leaders Arise with Joyful Julie. Join us as we explore life-changing, freedom-releasing biblical truths to empower leaders and patriots to reach their full potential, cancel out fraudulent beliefs, and increase in influence and financial success. Let's get started. It is so wonderful to be back with you again today. If you would please do me a favor and like and subscribe and share this podcast, you can be a force multiplier and you can get Joyful Julie and Leaders Arise out into the highways and byways. And so thank you so much for that. So in these days of chaos and confusing societal change, our foundational beliefs are under attack. They are being challenged. And it's getting to the point where everyone realizes that it is no longer, we're not in Kansas anymore. Do we believe in right and wrong? If we use the word right and wrong, what is right these days? What is wrong? Do we believe the news? Have we found conservative news? Have we found alternative places to get information? Do we believe in absolute truth or do we believe in relative truth? How do we figure out what to build our life on? Because today's podcast is Only Believe Part 2. When facing these uncertain times in our families, our businesses, in our job, in our health, like every single thing seems to be turning around these days, how do we only believe? Last time we were talking about those toxic tree structures that can be in our brain and how to transfer those or shift those over into building healthy, positive, empowering brain connections inside of our brain and obeying and participating and cooperating with the truths in Genesis. Well, today I'd like to talk a little bit about when do we know what we really believe? When do we know what we really believe and not just what we say we believe? So I think it's an interesting exercise when for your work, they go and do these team building exercises and they do ropes course and this and that. And one of the things that I've seen people do is they get their team around in this circle and they want a person in the middle to turn around, and they want that person to fall backwards into the arms of one of their team members, believing that their team member will catch them. So if we ask the team member, do you believe that they'll catch you? Sometimes they'll be like, no. Sometimes they'll be like, well, I hope they do. Or sometimes they're very courageous and they say, yes, I do. But you can always tell what's really happening when you look at their face. But when do we really know what they believe? When they take the leap of faith and let themselves fall backwards where they have to trust and rely on their team member to catch them. This is when we know it's going from an intellectual belief like, yes, they can catch me, to an experiential knowledge and belief, yes, they can catch me. Yes, they will catch me. Yes, I trust them to catch me. And this is why we go through team building exercises so that we can get greater connection, so that we can put maybe some like really important things to be done in the hands of our team member and gain confidence that they're actually going to do it. So now I'd like to take this concept that we use in the corporate world, and we're going to kind of transfer it into our personal world of leadership. As parents, as business owners, as artists, editors and writers, pastors, all sorts of walks of life, We face these challenges of what do we believe, who are we going to trust in, who are we going to rely on every day? Do we really believe? And as these uncertain times are coming at us, and we're watching riots and we're seeing pastors and pro-life people get arrested, and we're seeing that there's umpteen different definitions of how you identify as a human being rather than God's standard of that He created them male and female and that there's only two. All these things are starting to come at us, really pressing against our foundation of what do we really believe. As there are forces in the world right now that are trying to get you to move, that are trying to replace your Judeo-Christian value system, your morality, what normal life would look like, do we speak out? Do we continue to take bold action? Do we actually stand up as the disciple did in the square and tell people about Jesus, even when it's not going to make everyone else around us happy? Do we defend our children against books that are really not appropriate for children, genderqueer? I mean, really, are you actually taking a stand against some of the things that they're doing in our schools? Are we standing up for the innocent in our society? We have the opportunity to be writing and contacting and emailing and phoning our elected officials, giving them courage and telling them, we want you to stand up for what we believe in, not just cave to the political and social agenda. We need leaders right now more than anything. Or are we going to do what we're being pressured to do? Are we going to move off of our secure foundation? Are we going to turn off our conscience? And are we going to fall into the clutches of what the enemy, what some very unsavory people have planned for us? But the good news is that we can know the truth. We can know the source of the truth, the life, and the way that will bring us prosperity, that will bring us courage, that will bring us the ability to be witnesses in these uncertain times. And that is Jesus as our personal Lord and Savior, and it is our knowledge of the Bible, and it is the wisdom and empowerment of the Holy Spirit to apply that truth of the Bible to our everyday life. And there has never been a greater time on the face of the earth, or at least since I've been alive, which is, quite a long time. There has never been a greater need for the truth of the kingdom of heaven to bring light into the darkness, to bring truth to those who are being crushed. So what does this actually look like to go from I intellectually believe the Bible to standing up and being a light for good, to bring His truth to those who are weak, to bring His truth back to being the foundation of what is going to govern our lives? In Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 1, it says, "Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." What that really means is, in the Amplified, it expands this out for us. And so, listen, it's a little more wordy, but I think sometimes people actually understand why is this verse at the beginning of the chapter about faith. It says, "Now faith is the assurance," and then in parentheses, "the confirmation, the title deed of the things we hope for, being the proof we do not see, and the conviction of the reality, faith perceiving as real fact which is not revealed to the senses. So what this means is we have this thing that we're believing for that we can't see its existence yet. I can see school systems once again focusing on reading, writing, and arithmetic. I can see them not pushing this socialist agenda, not pushing these ungodly values on our children, and no drag shows with children attending. None of these books that are pornography being allowed in our schools. I can see that as leaders arise, as parents arise, as those grandmothers and grandfathers arise, as pastors arise and say, not on my watch. But what does this thing that I'm hoping for? Faith is the evidence. Faith is the assurance that that thing will come to pass. But here's actually what it looks like. It looks like bold action to go from it being invisible to manifesting in the earth. A very real example in my life is in 2007, there was an election in Kenya. And it was a Christian, and he was running against a Muslim. And the Christian won. And the Muslim ended up starting an uprising in that country where they were burning the cropland, which is one of the main exports, one of the main ways that people make money in that country. And so they were devastating people's livelihoods for years to come. Then the uprising got even worse, and they called tribes, they called all of the Muslims, they called certain tribes to begin to attack their friends and neighbors with machetes. And there were neighbors killing neighbors. There were people marauding groups of men, which, we have names for that in America, of people who were causing riots. But these people were taking machetes and they were going through neighborhoods, killing house after house after house, hurting children and women and killing men. And what happened is there was this terrible uprising. And in the summer of 2008, the Lord called me and he said, I want you to go to Kenya. And I told the Lord, you've got to be crazy. I can't go to Kenya. They're killing people. They're killing each other with machetes. And he told me, by the time you get there, the war will be over. The uprising will be over. And I need your voice to proclaim my truth in that country, because what God was hoping for was that the reconciliation, the regeneration, the restoration of people's faith, he wanted that to begin as soon as that war was over. Now, that was a faith act on my part to book that ticket. That was faith being the substance of what was in God's heart to birth forgiveness and reconciliation between those tribes, between those people groups, and to minister to the hearts of those who have been devastated by war. There were other acts of faith. There was packing the suitcase. There was writing out the will. There was planning the sermons and finding the music and renting the equipment. All of that was acts of faith for something that was hoped for. And then when the message of forgiveness went out, there was a whole group of people in front of the stage who needed forgiveness from God for what they had done during the war. Those who had perpetrated the violence were on one side of the stage. On the other side of the stage, there were those who had homes that had been burned. They had had to flee the area that they used to live in. Their coffee crop was devastated. Wells, this one bishop that came up to me afterward, who said, I needed you to come, had 200 churches wiped out that he had spent his lifetime establishing. There were people who gave their lives to Jesus that day. There were those who were forgiving their friends and their neighbors and beginning the grieving and the healing process after war. There were those who were being tormented by what they did during that time, who were being reconnected to God and receiving forgiveness for the terrible things that they had done. And all of that beautiful work was done because of steps of faith, one after the other, to see a dream become reality. And so what I wanted to birth in your heart today is that some of our world has been radically changing, and some of our dreams, they may seem impossible, but with God, all things are possible to him who believes. And those steps of faith will only come if we'll only truly believe. So what does that believing really look like? We're going to go back to our word picture of the team building exercise when the person is falling back, trusting, relying on their team member to catch them. And so for this power principle, we're going to go to John chapter 11, verses 25 and 26. Jesus begins by saying, I am the resurrection and the life. Whosoever believes in, and then there's a parenthesis in the Amplified Bible. What does believes in really mean? The Amplified Bible begins to tell us. It means to adhere to trust in, and rely on me. Although he may die, yet he shall live. It's when we actually believe in something that we're going to adhere to that thing in troubled times. We're going to continue because our roots are in that foundation. What we really believe is going to hold us in the midst of the storm. And there is a storm in our culture today. There may be a storm in your family. There may be a storm in your business. There may be a storm in whatever area of life you're struggling with right now. Someone may have rejected you. You may have had to quit your job because of a vaccination, and now you're struggling. I want you to know that the foundation of Jesus Christ is secure, and you can adhere to that foundation in the midst of every struggle, of every strife, and it's going to hold you. That the trauma and the cultural change and what the world is trying to get you to slink back into a corner and be overcome by fear and do whatever they say, that leaders arise. We are trying to help you and encourage you and empower you to keep your foundation strong, that you will not be moved in the day of adversity. There was a very bad day in my life. There was a very bad day in my life when the love of my life decided that he didn't want to be married anymore. And I'm not going to go into all of the story because that story is his to tell. But it is my story to tell, that in that day, I am so thankful that my foundation was in the Word of God, and that my foundation was in the intimacy that I had with the Lord. Because I remember crying on my bed that night, but out of my mouth, I was declaring, God, you are good. My foundation was secure. And in that day, I was adhering to it. I was trusting in that day that the God who had brought me out of trauma and into a beautiful freedom, that the God who had sent me to other parts of the world to tell people about Jesus, the God who had me write the Incredible Life Makeover, that he was going to hold me firm, that I could trust in him, that I could rely on him, even though the future seemed bleak, the future seemed uncertain. It was a lot like today, I'll tell you that. Because the enemy wants all of that fear and all of that doubt and all of that unbelief about what he's doing to conquer what's in our mind, what will come out of our mouth. But if our foundation is secure, if we're stable and fixed under the shadow of the Almighty, if we adhere to him, as this word says, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He said he is the resurrection and the life. That whoever believes in me, who relies on me, who trusts in me, although he may die, yet he will live. That in these days, if we believe in him, if we trust in him, that we don't look off in the waves like Peter when he was walking on the water. It said as soon as he looked down at the waves, all of a sudden he began to think, because deep fear and doubt were starting to come in. If we'll keep our gaze fixed on him, if we'll remember the power principle that we talked about, what we focus on, we give power to. And so today, this is part 2 of Only Believe. Because if we will keep our firm foundation on the kingdom of heaven in these days, we can go forward in the swirl of adversity, and we can go forward in complete confidence that we can do what God has called us to do. That we are not limited according to what is happening in this world, because we are the ambassadors, that we walk in the blessing, that we are going to be fruitful and multiply, that we are going to be full of faith and take those steps so that what we are hoping for will become manifest in the earth, and it will go from the unseen world through actions of faith and to come to be manifest on the earth, that we will be able to have the fruit of our actions, and it will be good. Because God is more than able to transform your life, your marriage, our schools, our communities, our government. He is more than able if leaders will arise today. Thank you for listening to this episode of Leaders Arise. For more information about my newsletter, speaking events, and coaching services, see newlifefortoday.com.